Hello, hello, hello. Getting started here. Welcome to Casual Krakoa. Thanks to those of you who are on the dot joining me right at jump here. Much appreciated. We'll be talking today all things X-Men comics released today, June 23rd, 2021. We have 3 new issues in the Hellfire Gala, and then I'm going to be talking a whole bunch about X-Men Solicits. Okay, we're going to be talking Marvel's September Solicits and the comics that they are announcing, which tell us a fair amount about what is to come here in the coming months and weeks. So we'll get started formally here in a moment. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of Comic Book Herald.com. Those of you who are with me live, please let me know if everything, video and audio, is coming through clearly. Let me know in the chat, or if there are any issues. That is much appreciated. And definitely get in your questions, comments, theories, the whole 9 yards. Again, all that I ask is that you be respectful in the chat. And of course, Super Chat is available for those of you who would like to contribute to the Comic Book Herald endeavors. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. So with that introduction out of the way, I think we can formally start here. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to Casual Krakoa. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. Today we're going to be talking about all the comics that came out in the X-Men's ongoing Hellfire Gala. We're kind of in the after-party phase of things here. We had Wolverine number 13, Sword number 6, and Way of X number 3. Pretty good batch, pretty darn good batch of comics that came out today. The Hellfire Gala has maintained the consistency and the strength, frankly, throughout, including, of course, the pivotal, the fulcrum of it today was Sword number 6. Like, that was the 4th centerpiece, really the 2nd main centerpiece, but the 4th key red issue part of the X-Men's Hellfire Gala occurred in Sword number 6 by Al Ewing, Valerio Schiti, and Marty Gracia. Now, I've got a full video review of that on Casual Krakoa, which you can find on the channel. Of course, you can find all those links in the show notes. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in Sword number 6, some of the theories that I think spiral out of that. In particular, what I have up on the video next to me, the trial of Magneto, okay? Which spirals nicely, frankly, with the conclusion of Sword number 6 into the Marvel September Solicits that were announced today, where we got some additional information about what the trial of Magneto is going to be. I think in a lot of ways we got some confirmations about what the story is going to be about, but there's still a lot of theorizing and supposition that can go into what the specifics of what has been teased so far will mean. Okay, so thanks everybody who's joining here live. Again, if you're not here live, you can get all these videos in full through the playlists on Crack and Krakoa. If you like these live streams, definitely please like, subscribe, and follow along with Comic Book Herald channel, because all that helps me greatly, and it helps me know that doing these live apps of Casual Krakoa every day every Wednesday rather, after the issues come out is worth it for everyone. So, but again, let's get questions in and let's start talking about the end of Sword number 6. Spoilers for Sword 6, Wolverine number 13, and Way of X number 3 will follow. If you haven't read the day's comics, I would recommend you do so, and then come on back and we can talk about what is to come. Okay, so in Sword number 6, let's talk about the end. It was a great issue. Great issue. Al Ewing is on another level. I mean, he is one of, if not the best writer at Marvel right now. He is telling fantastic stories. I'm loving the way that his X-Men universe stuff in Sword is spiraling and integrating with what he's doing in Guardians of the Galaxy. I said this in the Sword video, but if you're not reading Guardians of the Galaxy, or you weren't, if you're like just an X-Men fan or something, you're actually missing out on really important X-Men stuff. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy is becoming an unofficial X-book, basically, because of the fact that Ewing's involved and like his whole vision for Marvel Cosmic, which is the most excited I've been about Marvel Cosmic, I mean, since probably Hickman Avengers days. I guess kind of technically counts, he was doing a lot of stuff, but really since like the Annihilation era, right? Really since that kind of Abnett and Lanning Golden Age, I think was the peak. Ewing's doing great stuff, right? So I'm extremely, extremely excited about everything that he's doing there. But again, if you're not reading Guardians of the Galaxy, you're super missing out. And you should actually read Guardians of the Galaxy number 15 before you read Sword number 6 in terms of the order of events, because there's a reference there. Nova references, punching Magneto in the face. That happens in Guardians, okay? So it's well worth reading, but I'm super excited about Sword number 6. Now, the thing that definitely surprised me the most about this issue, and I think I'm far from alone in this, is not that Storm is the queen of the solar system, which is incredible. She is formerly the regent of Mars, which I love that look for Storm. I'm so excited about the types of stories that are going to get to be told with her character, whether it be in Sword or other books. Looks like it's going to be in Sword for the foreseeable future. But the surprise ending was a little Magneto reflection. He's literally toasting himself with a glass of whiskey, which is very, appropriate for Magneto. And then he is accepting in the visitor that he invited after hours. Okay, not as scandalous as it sounds. It's his once and future daughter, Wanda Maximoff. Now, without going into the mess of it, which I've done in previous, one of the earliest Kraken Krakoas, like 7 or 8, I went into the family history of the Maximoffs and of Scarlet Witch specifically. And basically where we stand right now in Marvel Comics is, as of 2015, Scarlet Witch is not a mutant. From 1963 through 2014, she was. Same with her twin brother, Pietro Maximoff, right? Quicksilver. But since that time, right, there's been this retcon saying actually they're products essentially of the High Evolutionary, and that they're not technically mutants, they're not technically the children of Magneto, okay? But Magneto is still having this moment, seemingly, of recognition of saying, like, I don't care. He basically is like, I don't care about all the semantics, I don't care about the specific details. You're still my daughter, right? Still my daughter to me. And it's a pretty emotional, resonant moment, I think, for these characters who, to say they've had an embattled relationship as father and daughter is unquestionably an understatement. Okay? But it means a lot. It means a lot for the Krakoa era of X-Men for them to have this moment of reconciliation, because what we've seen from Magneto, first off, let's back even that up. What we've seen from Krakoa in House of X number 4, right, when we get the list of atrocities committed against mutant kind and their perpetrators, number 1 on the list, Cassandra Nova, gets credit for 16 million mutants dead at Genosha in Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's new X-Men number 114 to 116, E is for extinction, right? Second on the list is Wanda Maximoff for the decimation of mutant kind, and she gets the label here, she gets a very special call out as the Great Pretender, because not only did Wanda decimate mutant kind by removing their X genes after the events of House of M and leaving literally 198 mutants left in the Marvel Universe, but she also was, in the view of Krakoa now, kind of culturally, she was pretending to be a mutant all that time. Now, was she actually doing that? Was that a conscious thing she was doing? No. But because it was later revealed that she was not a mutant, that is how it is viewed, right? That she was a Great Pretender all that time. She's one of the biggest enemies of Krakoa, right? Certainly one of the most reviled. I mean, the entire Crucible setup on Krakoa is about fixing Wanda's mistake, what she did in decimation. And this is a thing that the Marvel Universe has struggled with immensely. Okay, they have struggled immensely in terms of Wanda's decimation of mutant kind, her role as being deeply hated by mutants for that. There have been redemption tours. There have been attempts at recovery through the years. None of them really stick. Like, specifically in Young Avengers, the Children's Crusade, there's an attempt by the creators there to say, our guy, Dr. Doom, was actually responsible. He was really the one pulling the strings. And here's the thing. Readers today, fans today, they just don't accept that. Like, the story did not resonate enough in such a way where Magneto could say to the council, like, actually, it was Dr. Doom. He's the Great Pretender. Like, nobody cares. Like, that story just didn't hit. It didn't resonate in the way that No More Mutants did at the end of House of M. So, like, regardless of her fault in it, Wanda owns that burden, right? And it's entirely on her shoulders, and it's going to stay there. It's going to stay there until somebody like Magneto, hero of Krakoa, does something about it. And that's what he promises at the end of Sword number 6. He says, I will do basically whatever I can to make this right, basically, to make us a family again. The implication here is like lifting the Great Pretender burden from Wanda Maximoff. How's he going to do that, right? And how's that going to all tie in to the trial of Magneto? And this is how we get to September solicits of new Marvel Comics. So these are released today. Every month, Marvel releases a few months out what are the new comics going to be. And they had their September list come out. There's some really interesting books here, including an X-Men Onslaught Revelation one-shot that will spiral out of Way of X, and we'll get to that next. But there's also a Solicited for Trial Magneto #2. Now, issue #2 is solicited here. We knew this series was coming, right? It's been announced for some time. I did a video like in May about theories about what Trial Magneto is going to be, and we know it's going to be written by Lee Williams. We know it's going to have art by Lucas Wernick, and it's going to spiral out of the events of the Hellfire Gala. In the final issue of X Factor #10, there's going to be a murder, is what was teased, and basically it's like, okay, that's going to spiral into the trial of Magneto, and then people have theorized from there. Now, given what we know from the teasers of the trial of Magneto, and given that we see at the wee hours, 3 a.m. or whatever it is, Magneto meeting with Wanda Maximoff, meeting with the Scarlet Witch, there's certainly a setup at the end of Sword #6 that it's like, oh, he's going to kill Wanda? Or Wanda's going to die? Maybe that's the murder, where it looks like it's Magneto. There's a few ways where this works. There's a few ways where this gets pretty interesting, I would say. The first is Magneto might think that Wanda Maximoff needs to die in order to be resurrected through Krakoan protocols as a mutant. Like, in his head, it might be like, she is rightfully my daughter. I don't care how the High Evolutionary messed with her. I want to have her resurrected free from the High Evolutionary's influence as a mutant. Okay? Now, this might cross boundaries in as far as like what is okay in the resurrection protocols. It'll certainly conflict with Krakoan culture. And again, Exodus sitting around campfires on Krakoa telling the kids of the Great Pretender. It'll certainly mess with that in ways. But I could see Magneto thinking like, we need to get her revived as a mutant, and that argument leading to his trial. That would make some sense. It's possible, there's some question here in my head around like, why wouldn't he want to do this in a crucible? And I guess the reason probably is like, how on earth is he going to get her to a crucible? Like, Magneto's do it and ask the question, whatever the saying is, do it, don't ask for permission, right? He's not going to ask for forgiveness. He's not going to ask for permission. He's just going to take her out and say, yeah, here's what I was thinking about resurrection. And to his credit right now, it's hard to oversell in Krakoa right now, in this era of X-Men comics, how big of a hero Magneto is, okay? We're coming off of Planet-Size X-Men #1. Came out last week. Magneto led the strategy, corralled all of the players, all of the Omega-level mutants, to terraform Mars, to transport all of the Arakko mutants to that planet, and to claim it Planet Arakko in the name of mutant kind. That's Magneto's plan. In Sword #6 today, we see the gathering of this resource, Mysterium, is now being leveraged by Sword and the Mutant Space Program as basically galactic currency, as basically the most valuable material in the galaxy, and only mutants can create it. And it gives them this amazing economic leverage, much like they have with Krakoan drugs on Earth. Magneto took a part in orchestrating that too. All of these plans, all of these things that are coming together at the Hellfire Gala, like, Magneto is leading the charge on all this. Not to mention, of course, just his role as a protector of mutant kind historically, as the hero of Krakoa back in, like, the Hickman-written X-Men Empire issue, where he's defending the nation from Kotati. Like, he should be, and is, I think, in most ways, like, the hero of the island. It's not Professor X. Professor X is like, as much as we know, he's a dirty, rotten, no good jerk. Professor X, I would think, to Krakoa is almost, I mean, he has a god complex, but it's also like, he's that father figure. He's almost like a godlike father figure, right? He's the one who like makes their rebirth possible, makes their immortality possible, but he's not out on the front lines being the action hero of the people. Magneto is. He is that. So for him to do something that would put him on trial on Krakoa, that's actually a pretty tall order. Like it's not a popularity contest, but if it was, I think Magneto wins every time, on members of the Quiet Council. Like, who among mutant kind is more popular among mutants than Magneto? I don't know that you're going to find anyone else. Dupe, #1, Magneto #2, right? Those are the power rankings. So I think that's going to play a big role here in the perception of what he's trying to do with Scarlet Witch, if it is in fact Scarlet Witch who ends up dead. Let's talk about a couple specifics of that scenario. Of if this is a death of Scarlet Witch and him attempting to get her resurrected scenario. Okay? Which I think is very possible. And I think, part of it too is like, look at the variant cover for Magneto, Trial Magneto #2. We got metal darts through the whole House of M. Actually, not the whole. We're missing granddaughter Luna. Which, fair enough. She's a kid. But we have Quicksilver. We got a jacked Billy, I presume. I don't know why he's looking so yoked here. Polaris, Tommy, Billy and Tommy being the kids of Wanda and Vision, after a fashion, and Wanda, right? So it's like, okay, the implication of that cover, which is a variant, and covers always lie. Okay? Always, always, always. But if you take the implication of this, it's like, okay, someone in the House of M might die. And this could put Magneto on trial. Now, the other reason I think it makes a lot of sense that someone in the House of M might die is if you look at the solicit text for the trial of Magneto #2. First thing that jumped out at me, I think this issue solicited is 48 pages. These issues are enormous. That's a big, big comic. That's 2 comics in one. This is a 5-issue event series from Lee Williams and Lucas Wernick. If it's straight up 48 pages of story per comic, like that's a massive project. Of course, Leia had to come off X Factor to make this happen. Not that it should have been canceled. I don't think it should have been. But that makes sense. Okay, so that jumped out at me. But also, okay, here's the solicit text for Trial of Magneto #2. Heroes of the Marvel Universe came to Krakoa for a memorial. Now they've got to fight. Why would the heroes of the Marvel Universe, the Avengers, who were just at this Hellfire Gala looking very out of place in their not at all cool suits, right? Why would they come to Krakoa for a memorial? Well, it makes sense. It would be one of their own. It would be someone in the Avengers family. It would be a hero of Earth. Who are those characters? Well, Wanda and Pietro. Avengers as of Avengers #16. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, right? The reformation of the team, where Captain America takes in all previous villains. Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Hawkeye, reforms the Avengers, okay? They're both Avengers. So your leading candidates here are Wanda and Quicksilver. Now, I think the Heroes of Krakoa, or the Heroes of Earth, rather, they would also come for a memorial for Billy or Tommy. Billy doesn't make any sense. Billy doesn't make a lick of sense because he's up in space with Hulkling, right? They're married. They're running a galaxy. They're running the Kree Shi'ar Empire. Doesn't make any sense. Tommy actually makes a fair amount of sense. Tommy's a strong possibility. Why would Magneto kill his grandson? That's a big question. Okay, that would actually tie into one of the theories I pitched back in the Trial of Magneto video most heavily, which was, okay, this is written by Lee Williams. And why is it written by her, spiraling out of her X Factor series? Tommy's connections to Prodigy, the Think Fast relationship between these two characters, romantic relationship between Tommy and Prodigy, that could be the connection that kind of brings the X Factor and the Lee Williams creative part of it into the Trial of Magneto. That would be like a Magneto's covering something up about questions around Prodigy's resurrection, of which there are many, because basically the revelation of X Factor that still has not been resolved is Prodigy was resurrected, but the implication is he never actually died, or at least his proof of death wasn't confirmed. Tommy is the one who can prove that, because he has photos of them together the night Prodigy allegedly died. So if Magneto was for some reason so worried about that information getting out there, he decided to murder his grandson at the Hellfire Gala. There's a connection there. Does that seem likely? It doesn't. I don't think it does. But there's a way that makes sense. Polaris, I think, no chance. Right? Why would Magneto kill someone who was just elected onto the X-Men? And also, I don't think the heroes of the world would not have been invited to a memorial necessarily, right? Polaris isn't an Avenger. She's always been just part of the X-Men universe. So it makes the most sense that it could be Scarlet Witch or Quicksilver. Nobody's talking about Quicksilver. And fair enough. It's hilarious that if this is Magneto, we'll get to that in a second, if it is him, that he only invited Wanda. That's great. Love it. Very funny. Magneto, if I was Magneto and I wanted to get Wanda back in my life and make her a mutant, I would try that out on Quicksilver first. Right? You can test the theory that can they be resurrected as a mutant just as easily on Quicksilver as you could on Wanda. The fact that no one's talking about it, I think, makes it a little less expected. Because right now, Sword number 6 ends, and it's like, okay, Magneto and Wanda are together in a room. Pretty likely, like, that she's the one who's going to die. But it would make a lot more sense. Not a lot more sense, but it would be a nice little twist if it was Quicksilver, actually. And that would bring the Avengers part of it into it. The heroes might come for the memorial of Pietro. I literally don't know where he is in the Marvel Universe. I read a lot of comics. Too many, some would argue. And I could not tell you right now what Quicksilver is doing. Running, most likely. Being very snobbish. Absolutely. But I could not tell you where he is. Okay? So, don't rule out that this could be a Quicksilver thing. And that kind of being, Wanda kind of being a red herring of sorts, but related. Because Magneto does potentially want to resurrect them. The rest of the solicit text on Trial of Magneto number 2 says Magneto pushes Krakoa and the council to the brink, and then it says also there's something wrong with the body. All of this definitely can lead into theories around this being Wanda as the deceased. The fact that Magneto would be pushing Krakoa and the council, that he's really putting them to the test, would be suggestive of it being Scarlet Witch. Again, she's the Great Pretender. She's an enemy of mutant kind. It's a big ask. That's a big ask to say, hey, let's do something for the Great Pretender. Let's change that entire narrative and bring her back as a mutant. Because even if she's brought back as a mutant, Scarlet Witch still said, no more mutants. The Crucible is still set up to restore powers that are still not there from decimation. Even if she's a mutant and did that, there's probably more empathy, but I don't know how much. And I really don't. And also, you have to consider, if Magneto kills Wanda or Quicksilver or anyone in the House of M, except for Polaris and Tommy, I guess, maybe Billy, I don't know. If he kills Wanda and Quicksilver specifically right now, he'd be violating the Kill No Man law. Okay? He's killing humans, is what happened there. So then you got to bring that into question as well. There's a lot that goes into it. I think it's interesting. I think the fact that there's something wrong with the body, that to me says, like, they tried to resurrect Wanda and it's not going right. It'd be kind of a Kitty Pryde situation where it's like, okay, something is weird here. And that would make a lot of sense. That would add up because, we have this almost mutant, right? And it would make sense that resurrection wouldn't totally function like they expected and like Professor X set up. So, I'm curious what you all think. Definitely want to know, what other people think about Trial of Magneto. Like, is this definitely going to be the Scarlet? Is this the Scarlet Witch re-retcon? I think is the end outcome that is kind of, it makes the most sense. I think that fans are probably clamoring for in a lot of ways the most, is that by the end of the Trial of Magneto, Scarlet Witch, and I guess Quicksilver, if you care, are mutants again. I think that's the outcome that most people want the most. The question is just like, well, what does that do to Magneto in the meantime? I could also see, and I think I mentioned this in the Sword video, I could also see Magneto being like, I'm responsible for Wanda. I raised her, or I took her in as my own. I put her in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, when she was young. Put me on trial in her place. I could see him trying to do that. I don't feel like that would work, but I could see him taking that on. But again, someone is actually going to die. Someone is actually going to die, and it's going to bring the heroes of the Marvel Universe to Krakoa for a memorial. So probably we're not looking at a metaphorical trial in that sense. I do want to mention too that, like, we do see in Way of X, we see Nightcrawler passed out drunk. Good old super drunk priest Nightcrawler passed out with Magneto and Wanda meeting in the background. Now, I don't anticipate Kurt's memory of this night is going to exist, nonetheless be accurate, but he could potentially be the drunk witness who places them in the same place at the same time. Because otherwise, it's like, all right, let's say Magneto leaves that room, Scarlet Witch is found dead. Who can prove he was there? Who knows Magneto was in there? There's a few ways you could do that, but Kurt is like literally sitting there and they don't know because he's passed out drunk. Could he have had some consciousness, some memory that might return? Maybe. We'll see. I do also kind of like the idea here. One of my earliest thoughts on this was, okay, Magneto's acting. It reads very much like Magneto, the end of Sword number 6. Like 100%, it makes sense that he'd be saying these things about his daughter, that he'd be saying he wants Wanda back in his life. He's also been operating kind of the opposite of that, though. He's just been expressing the opposite emotions. He kind of, under his breath, refers to Wanda as the great pretender earlier in Sword. He had just done the same with Franklin Richards. Basically, like, kind of like, the party line of like, oh, that pretender. Like, he's saying the things that Professor X is championing of the X-Men. Does he actually believe them himself? Maybe not. I could see him being more emotional about it and actually having more empathy for these individuals who identified as mutant and through no fault of their own, maybe with Franklin, we don't really know, had that stripped from them, right? And it potentially makes sense to me that this isn't actually Magneto. Who would it be then? Well, this brings in the common and widely proliferated theory that Mystique is going to be the one who sets up Magneto, sets him up as a murderer, and then that leads to the trial of Magneto. Because again, Mystique wants revenge on Professor X and Magneto, right? She's been absolutely betrayed by them, set up to fail by them at every step, essentially. Arguably set up to fail. I think she could have succeeded potentially, but could this be Mystique pretending to be Magneto? Her sending the invite to Scarlet Witch. Magneto actually knows nothing about this, and then murdering Scarlet Witch to set up Magneto. Possibly. It seems. I don't know. It raises the question of why would Mystique do that? Why would she select the Scarlet Witch? Because that's actually, does she know that will actually strike at Magneto's heart? Not only will it set him up for a trial, but it will hit him emotionally. If she knows that, if we believe that Mystique thinks, yes, he still feels for his daughter, then I think it makes sense. But I do kind of like the idea of it being Mystique pretending to be Magneto, and that's part of the twist. But I don't know. It's hard to say which one I prefer, honestly, because either it's set up for Inferno, which is going to start at the same time here. Inferno's going to be coming out in September, basically as Trial of Magneto's coming out. There's a lot of big X-Men stuff that's going to be happening at the same time. We're going to have Trial of Magneto, we're going to have this Onslaught revelation, we're going to have Inferno, and then, of course, just everything that's going on in all the X-books. September's going to be busy. It's going to be a busy fall. It's an exciting time to be reading X-Men comics. But, it's a possibility the Mystique's involved here as well. I would call out, too, in terms of the chances of this being a Magneto kills Scarlet Witch story. In September, we also have Solicited, this Darkhold ongoing, written by Steve Orlando. That's going to feature Scarlet Witch. That's going to feature Wanda. Now, this would be far from the first time that characters are in places they can't be. Two places at the same time they can't be in Marvel Comics, right? That happens a lot. But that would be pretty poor planning. Pretty poor planning on the parts of the X-Office and Steve Orlando, writing this Darkhold series, to have her killed in one book, but then leading this Darkhold saga in another. That would be particularly bad. So that I think, boosts my Quicksilver theory. That boosts the idea that, it's actually going to be Pietro, because Wanda has to be around for this Darkhold stuff. But you could easily hand wave that away and just be like, they're whatever. Darkhold stuff happened a while ago, maybe. Let's pretend. Who knows? Continuities, you got to figure it out after the fact, more or less, right? So it could be easiest for the deceased to be Quicksilver, but I don't know for sure. It also does not feel like an accident to me, if we look at the X-Men Solicits, that the High Evolutionary is going to be the main antagonist in the Jerry Duggan and Pepe Larraz X-Men run, this first few arcs. That doesn't feel like an accident either. Okay? High Evolutionary being, in the Rick Remender written retcon, the individual who did basically fake Wanda and Pietro's mutantdom and is the one who confirmed for them that they are not mutants. There could be some ties there as well. I hope Trial of Magneto is not super High Evolutionary focused. Not a character I have a ton of time for. But again, just the fact that all this stuff is kind of spiraling and converging at the same time, given that clearly there needs to be some form of reconciliation between Magneto and Wanda and Mutant Kind. That's an interesting story to be told, and I look forward to it being told. I mean, I think the one thing that Sword Number 6 to me pretty clearly confirms, as well as these solicits, is Trial of Magneto is for sure a House of M Magneto family story. It's hard to imagine now a scenario where it's not, whereas previously, the theories were it could be anybody who died. It could be any number of scenarios, but now it definitely reads like, okay, this is going to be a House of M Magneto family story, and that's going to put Magneto on trial, even if it's Quicksilver, who is the one who dies, or Tommy, or whatever. Scarlet Witch is still going to be heavily involved, I think, in the proceedings. And I think the fact that Lee Williams makes a lot of sense. Like, that would be... I'm looking forward to it. I mean, honestly, like, I'm super looking forward to Trial of Magneto. I'm incredibly looking forward to Inferno. And then we got this Onslaught revelation to talk about, too. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about the theories for Trial of Magneto. I'm definitely curious to hear, like, what people look forward to. What else might be coming that I might not be talking about, But it's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's a good time to be an X-Men fan reading these comics. We got a question here from the great Matt Draper. Love Matt Draper's content. Definitely check it out on YouTube here occasionally when Matt, comes down to my level and writes about comics. You can find the articles on the scripts for his videos on comicbookherald.com. Little crossover there. But Matt asks, I thought it was interesting the solicit for Inferno says the beginning of the culmination of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. Seems too soon. I've seen a fair amount of people asking about this today. I've gotten a handful of tweets, handful of YouTube things, right? And that language seems to be really jumping out at people, the fact that it's the culmination. My stance on this is and has been, this Inferno is not the end. It's not even close to the end. I don't even think now, after the Hellfire Gala, that it's likely that Inferno is a reset button story. I think, given Moira's involvement, given Mystique and Destiny's involvement, it certainly leading into it felt like, okay, this could be the story that gets us to Moira hitting the big Life 11 reset button. I don't even think it's going to be that because there's so much cool setup now through the Hellfire Gala. Like, if that happens, if we get a life reset with Moira, then we just had Mutant Kind claim Mars. We had them, initiate a galactic currency of Mysterium. We'd only have 3 months of stories with that. That just feels too slight with all the stuff that's happening right now. Now, maybe that's how you do it. Maybe that's a nice zig and kind of a zag. But to me, it's like there's so much more story to be told. I can't imagine that Inferno would be the true end of it. Now, could it set up things that get us to a Life 11? Absolutely. I think it has to. I think, it's the follow-up to House and Powers. I think that culmination wording is probably, most likely, it's just solicit stuff that we shouldn't get overworked up about. I don't think it's an indication of it being an end. I think we're still in the early-ish stages of Hickman's X-Men. I think, too, if Marvel was really approaching the end of Jonathan Hickman's narrative, we would see announcements about that. We would see a lot of press about the big finale, the grand finale to House and Powers. It would not be subtle. It would not be read the tea leaves, read between the lines. They used culmination. So I think you're right to question what that means, but I really don't think that means anything regarding this actually being an end. Could it be? I think it's, and maybe I've said this in the past, probably, right? I'm going to repeat myself doing these things. But, it's going to be the end of Krakoa as we know it. I think that much is sure. It's going to be the end of mutant harmony on Krakoa. Is this going to mean a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants? Is this going to mean Emma, Mystique, Legion, maybe Magneto form a new island, a rival island, that sort of thing? I think probably, right? I think that's the ending that we're potentially looking at. We're not looking at an ending of this X-Men saga, and we're not looking at an ending of this Moira Lifeline. As far as Jonathan Hickman's involvement, as a writer, obviously I have no inside information, but just given what we know of his past work at Marvel, I mean, Avengers was a let's see, 12, 13, 14, 15 into 16, four plus years plan. Fantastic Four, similar-ish, right? X-Men, I said last week on Planet Size with Ernie and Verno, like if Hickman wants to, and I don't know that he would, but like he's got enough stuff here to be on this book for like 10 years. like this book could go forever. I think, most likely scenario is we're looking at a 4-ish, 5-year story. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for Inferno, but no, I don't think the Solicits in any way suggest to me that like we're approaching a conclusion. That would be a huge bummer to me if we were, and I hope that is not the case. I think that would be tremendously disappointing. Nonetheless, good question. So, all right, keep getting your questions in here in the chat. I'm seeing a couple come through in the super chat, which I will definitely be getting to here. But I think let's talk then, if we're done with Trial of Magneto, let's talk a little Way of X and the Onslaught revelation that came today, right? Got to scroll through the Guardians pulls here. Let's go to Onslaught revelation. Okay, so this is the other drop in the Solicits. I'm going to do a couple super chat questions before I talk about this. I need like some sampled commercial breaks for these, right? Somebody want to come like, if anybody has like a sponsor, like a good paying sponsor that wants to like stand behind me the whole time and then plug their stuff on the mic while I drink some water, that'd be sweet. So Onslaught Revelation was revealed today. Dominic asks, Way of X number 3 has provided a great many mutant orphans. How would you think Nanny would react to the sudden influx of so many resources? Nanny does love mutant children. This much is true. So this is, in Way of X number 3, one of the reveals today is the character Stacy X is running a pleasure house of sorts. Kurt reacts very puritanically, very prudishly to this, and I think is rightly put in his place by Stacy. But Stacy also reveals that, like, in this era of X-Men, and one thing Cy Spurrier and Bob Quinn are doing such a good job with is they're poking the holes at the bliss. They're poking the holes at the paradise that I think a lot of fans who are noting the creepiness of Professor X, the potential out of character behavior of some of mutant kind, they're poking the holes at that in ways that are interesting with curiosity and with Kurt's own sort of like doubt about what's going on in Krakoa. And one of the things we find out in Way of X is mutants are making more mutants. Okay, they are following that law. They are having sex. They're having babies. But many of those children are being dropped off at Stacy X's orphanage and just like given away. And it's kind of terrifying. It's kind of horrifying. Not that, like, obviously this happens in the world. It's the basis of many a story, right? But like that would be happening on Krakoa. It like in bulk, like that's concerning, I think. Yes, so we do have a lot of mutant orphans. Nanny would make a heck of a lot of sense to come in and have a role with those. Honestly, I'm not like eager to get anyone on Hellions off of Hellions for any period of time. But that could be exactly what Nanny needs. I mean, honestly, like, here's the thing is like Nanny and Orphan Maker they've been together too long. Okay. That's like, that's a little like Game of Thrones where you have the like 13-year-old kid, like still breastfeeding. Like they've been a little together, a little too long, a lot too long. And clearly Orphan Maker, like he's like a surly teen now. Like dude needs his own world. Like Nanny, she needs actual babies again. Yeah, get her involved with the mutant orphanage. Great call, Dominic. I think that should totally make sense. Alma asks here in the super chat, Dr. Doom talked about Abigail Brand being a map maker. Do you think it's tying into Avengers, New Avengers? And if so, how? Yeah, I did. Well, no, I don't. I did notice that as well. So Doom references Brand. He's kind of describing her. And he describes her as basically a planner, is what he's saying, but he does call her a map maker. That's pretty loaded language in Hickman-verse. In Hickman speak, if you've read Avengers and New Avengers, you have your builders, you have your map makers, you have these entities out in the cosmos. I mean, I am very curious, like, do those beings still exist in any significant capacity post-Secret Wars? What are their roles? What are they doing? I always found the map maker builder stuff kind of the least Definitely like the hardest to understand, I think, of that Hickman Avengers run. Like those entities are very nebulous. They don't make a heck of a lot of sense, at least inherently to me. And part of that is just like they're new, and we don't have decades of Marvel history to tell us what their deal is. So they're kind of like they're almost like robots. Like all of them are just like non-entities in a way. Like there's no personality associated, with the exception of certain like the Black Swan, right? And like things on the periphery of those types of entities. I don't think Doom is literally referencing the map makers in reference to Abigail Brand. I mean, she is half alien, half mutant, I want to say, her parentage. Could the alien side of that be a map maker? Like, that would be a wild turn, which would be super fun. So if that was a deliberate play on words, I salute you, Alma, for noting it, and I salute Al Ewing for doing it. I did not read it that way. I definitely read it more as just kind of a way of describing, like, she's a plotter. She puts everything together, and she knows everything that's happening, in the galaxy. So, all right, today in Way of X number 3, I kind of talked about it. We kick off. Kurt's super drunk throughout the entire thing. He's really struggling to basically, figure out what's going on. He hasn't carved out his religion yet. He hasn't carved out his way. And basically the rest of the issue is him awakening to a massive hangover and kind of trying to figure out what Make More Mutants should be. It's really digging into that law. There's a few interesting things that happen in this issue. I mentioned the Stacey X stuff. The fact that Stacey X is involved I think is really interesting. She's a really complicated character throughout the 2000s because there's a lot of really like very poorly handled character work with her. I'm interested to see sort of a reformation of this character. I mean, I guess in the simplest terms, is like she's a mutant sex worker, was for a long time. She has pheromone powers, which are kind of like powers of seduction, but also a heck of a lot of other powers. And I like this interpretation of her character by Cy Spurrier and Bob Quinn. I'm looking forward to seeing more from her, especially because she really puts Kurt in his place. Really kind of like is able to joke with him, but also like stand up angrily to him when he's saying things that don't make a heck of a lot of sense. One of the big things that happened in this issue too is like apparently the Zorn brothers, X Zorn and Z Zorn, they're just following Legion around now. Somebody noticed this in a comment, and I was like, oh yeah, that's weird. Like I wonder like why they're in the background whenever Legion shows up. But now that he's referencing them, like this is a known thing. And that's kind of fascinating to me too. Like, why are they following Legion around? Because the Zorns they have hardly been touched in this era of X-Men, right? Like, very little has happened with them since we saw Hickman use Zorn in Powers of X. So I haven't given this a lick of thought in terms of theories or anything, but like, why are the Zorn brothers following Legion around? That's really interesting, right? And that's a pretty solid powerhouse trio right there of Legion, Zorn, and Zorn. So like that's a trio I want on my side if I'm having this Mystique, Emma Frost, insurrection kind of thing, right? We talked about the babies. Stacey X says what we need is folks who give a damn about other folks. Again, like this is the premise of Way of X is Kurt finding a rot at the heart of mutant kind in the Krakoan paradise and trying to come up with a religion, but also just like a purpose for everyone that I think delivers exactly what Stacey X says here. Folks who give a damn about other folks. Folks who give up their babies willy-nilly doesn't feel that way. And it's the willy-nilly part of it that I really want to emphasize there, right? But the biggest thing that happens in Way of X, which has been happening since Way of X number 2, is like Onslaught is just on Krakoa. Like, Onslaught is loose. He's doing his thing. He's like running around like a psychic, like evil prankster, essentially. He's afoot and he's loose, and Legion's asking the question, which is making Kurt think, like, are Xavier, our Professor X, and Magneto like already corrupted by Onslaught? Like, if Onslaught's here, are their actions even their own? I don't expect that, like, I didn't expect that, like, Way of X was going to have this major Onslaught revelation. Well, I didn't expect it at all, obviously. Like, it was a total surprise last issue. But I didn't expect it to be like, oh yeah, and Way of X will reveal that Professor X and Magneto have been controlled by Onslaught this whole time. Like, I don't think that's the type of story we're doing. I don't think we're going to get that type of revelation, play on words, in a book outside of Inferno. But now that we have a 40-page X-Men Onslaught Revelation one-shot coming. It's going to be written by Cy Spurrier and Bob Quinn. It's going to come out after Wave X number 5, which comes out in August. Now I'm kind of like, well, you could do that there. Again, it's like all these things are kind of converging and coming out at the same time. Onslaught's role on Krakoa. Inferno dealing with Moira and Destiny, right? All that, the trial of Magneto, all these things are like happening at the same time. This is a lot going on in Krakoa, which is fascinating. I have seen, it's kind of besides the point, but I have seen a number of people be like, Wave X is good enough that I'm thinking about reading the Onslaught saga again. Okay? I'm gonna say this once here on the Casual Krakoa, and maybe I'll say it again another time. You don't need to do that. I promise you, you don't need to do that. Listen, I feel the temptation as well. I do. I feel the temptations. I've been talking to my priest, Kurt Wagner, about it, and he said I do not need to read the entire Onslaught saga again. Nonetheless, if you are kind of interested, because I would understand if you were, the My Marvel This Year Reading Club and podcast that I do with Zach Dean through Comic Book Herald, we are in 1992. We are approaching Age of Apocalypse in 1996, Onslaught, reading territory. We read through the entire Marvel Universe year by year, or all the good stuff, rather. All the curated, like, essential stuff. So if you want to get to Onslaught, check out the My Marvel This Year podcast. But, okay. So, you don't need to read it again, but, like, here's the thing about Onslaught, is it's a lot like the Clone Saga, Spider-Man Clone Saga, which might be oddly relevant today as well. A lot of news today. But it's a lot like that in that there's actually some really cool stuff there. There's some kernels of really fun ideas, issues that are really good. I'll always kind of remember the Uncanny X-Men issue where Onslaught punches Juggernaut across the city. Stands out in my memory. Very good stuff. They go on way too long. Onslaught goes on way too long. Clone Saga goes on way too long. They're both coming out as Marvel is like spiraling into bankruptcy. It's just, so like behind the scenes for Marvel is a very bad time, arguably the worst time, and those stories suffer for it. They'd be better if they happened today. I have no doubt. But okay, so anyway, that's enough about the original Onslaught. Here's what we know from the Solicits, okay? The X-Men's greatest foe, mutant kind's primal evil, this is Onslaught, slithers in the minds of its most senior leaders, okay? And then we have a handful of other things that are happening. And basically it's like, will Nightcrawler come up with the religion that fixes this, or will Krakoa slip into the abyss? I didn't expect this to be happening in a one-shot, definitely. I thought, all the Onslaught stuff would be contained to Wave X. I really hope this doesn't mean that Wave X is ending with issue number 5. That would suck. But I don't know that it would. It's just like, okay, there's going to be an oversized Onslaught revelation. Again, like this will come out after Onslaught number 5, and most importantly, after my August interview with Cy Spurrier, which, definitely if you are not subscribed to the Comic Book Herald channel, I recommend you do so you can get that in August. Should be a good time. I'll be doing it live here on the YouTube channel. But, I'm excited for this story. Like, this book rules. I think Wave X is great. I think I was kind of ranking them in my head kind of as I went through Sword. And I would say right now it's like Sword and Hellions, like 1A, 1B. And then Wave X is probably my number 3 below them. I didn't think Wave X number 3 was like incredible. I actually think it made one particularly bad misstep in this issue, which was Legion trying to coordinate like the psychic sex between Loa and what is it, Mercury, and that I thought that whole thread was just like very poorly done. I thought I think there's some really negative implications of what happened there. That could be inferred out of that. So that felt like a pretty major misstep to me, honestly. But otherwise, I've really enjoyed Wave X number 3. So, so anyway, that's where I'm at with that. I think I want to know what people think about Onslaught Revelation. I don't necessarily have massive theories about this because I guess the big question, so like, I don't really think that like Professor X and Magneto are like driven by Onslaught, right? I don't really think he's like controlling their actions necessarily. I feel like the entity is just kind of loose. Like it's just kind of loose on the island and it's just causing sinister vibes, if you will. Like I kind of feel like Onslaught's going to be almost like a Shadow King like role, like we see in New Mutants right now. but more sinister, frankly, because Shadow King at least was like pretending. But I don't. The big question for me is like, how did Onslaught get here? Like, how does that make sense? You know, and are Professor X and Magneto missing parts of themselves because Onslaught is here? Or do we treat Onslaught as the psychic entity? Do we actually treat Onslaught like Legion, like the child of Professor X and Magneto? You know, like I mean, I don't know that it would be considered like a chimera, but like Onslaught is this combination of Professor X and Magneto that did not happen through natural childbirth, you know, to put it in our terms. So does Onslaught like? Is there a version of this where they actually come to a revelation where they're like, "Oh, we understand, you know, Onslaught," and he kind of becomes this fun, goofy, like childlike character, and like they totally flip the expectation of what Onslaught is, going from this '90s all-encompassing like big bad monster. You know, hey, what's the best thing we could do with X-Men? Let's have Magneto, but make him way bigger and monstrous, and give him Professor X's powers. That'll be dope. And they were right. But do we do that? Do we flip that and actually have him like a childlike, you know, son of Professor X and Magneto? And he's kind of just this like psychic character. I mean, that to me would be in the Krakoan standard of breaking all the rules, of doing something new and unique as opposed to playing out the same stories. And that to me would be interesting. But I'm definitely interested in hearing what you have to say on the comic. Let me know in your theories. Let me know in the show notes and all that fun stuff. In the show notes, in the comments here. And the Krakoan for Way of X #4 reads Errors and Graces. I think. I don't know. I don't know what that means. I mean, errors makes sense with Legion, with Onslaught. Graces, I don't know. There's probably some religious component that I haven't looked into. Maybe that would make sense. But that's what's coming. Onslaught Revelation, Trial of Magneto. Some big, exciting stuff. I am, again, like, this is a good time to be an X-Men Comics fan. I say it often. It is very, very true. And it is proven again today with all of these announcements and also just with the comics that came out today. I haven't even talked yet about Wolverine #13. There was actually some... So Percy's X-Force Wolverine saga connects here again, where Wolverine #13 follows in the aftermath of, in X-Force in the Hellfire Gala, Beast invited the Terra Verde ambassadors that he is basically manipulating and controlling through Floronics or whatever. He's made them, he's programming them as allies, as political prisoners in their own bodies. And in Wolverine, they deal with the aftermath of them breaking free of that. Okay, and we actually get some really important stuff happening here. Like I'm surprised how much essential stuff is happening in the Percyverse throughout this Hellfire Gala in a good way. But like we get Sage standing up to Beast, hell yeah. We get Emma standing up to Beast, calling him out, finding him out, and calling him a bastard, and Beast basically responding and being like, somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to be the worst, and I don't care if it's me. Beast is owning all of his evilness right now. And there is just, we're talking about the trial of Magneto. I mean, the fact, like, it should be the trial of Beast. Like, I don't think anyone disagrees. Nobody is rooting for Beast anymore. The only thing fans are rooting for is for a return to that lovable bouncing Beast. But like Beast is just owning being the worst, and I'm most curious out of all this to see what the reaction will be among the Quiet Council, among anyone else on Krakoa who knows about what they do about Beast leading X-Force. I mean, I think too, one thing we can expect, or probably should expect in X-Force, is like, it doesn't seem like Beast, like Wolverine finds out basically what Beast did here. Emma knows now. Like, it doesn't seem like X-Force can stay together as a unit in quite the same way with Beast at the head of it. I feel like Beast's time at the head of X-Force is rapidly approaching a conclusion, and that's obviously going to end pretty poorly. So, I mean, I do have to give Beast credit, though, in the sense, or Percy's writing to Beast credit, in the sense of, as much as you might be a fan of that character and want to see him behaving better, more interestingly, it is interesting to have, it's a more interesting story to have Beast making these types of arguments. Basically, he was like, I will make a logical argument for the Krakoan benefit of any tragedy, of any genocide, of any takeover of a nation. Like, Beast will make that argument, right? He will logic his way out of any of the ethics, and he's in such a I'm a god state. I mean, that's what he's telling Emma today is like mutants are gods. Krakoa is a new god. These little things don't matter really in the grand scheme. Like he's actually thinking, in his way of the long term that Moira and Professor X and Magneto all should be planning for. Like that's the long term that more characters. So like it's actually interesting. Like if Beast gets found out and gets penalized in some way, that's actually a character who would connect with Moira on a level that like I don't know that anyone else would in the mutantverse right now. Like he would hear what she had to say, he would look at it and he'd be like, "Oh, cool, give me some of those Destiny diaries. Let's figure this out." Like Beast would be a huge ally to Moira right now, so I could see it going that direction. But obviously that won't happen before Inferno. Could it happen during Inferno? Absolutely, absolutely. I think that'd be interesting. The Krakoan for that issue next reads Solemn, which I'm really excited to see Solemn return after Ten of Swords. That'll be a great addition for Wolverine. It'd be nice for Wolverine to feel like its own book again. I gotta say, like I like. Generally, like I just talked about, like I like Ewing connecting his Guardians and Sword. I like that they're of a piece of the Marvel Cosmic Verse. I'm not loving it as much with Benjamin Percy on X-Force and Wolverine. I think the issues of Wolverine that are X-Force issues, there are issues of Wolverine that are X-Force issues, right? And I would kind of like it if all the X-Force comics were contained and then Wolverine had actual Wolverine stories like he does when he's dealing with vampires, and probably when he's dealing with Solemn. I think that'll be interesting. So we'll see if we get back to that. All right, so I'm getting close to conclusion here. If you have any final questions, definitely let me know. Thanks to everybody who's contributed questions here and put stuff in the super chat. It's all been greatly appreciated. Again, if you like Comic Book Herald stuff, definitely subscribe to the channel here. You can find me on social at Comic Book Herald, and you can find my website at comicbookherald.com for all sorts of great writing and reading orders. But yeah, big day X-Men Comics. It was great stuff. I appreciate everybody hopping on here to talk. I did see a question about the Spider-Man announcement today and stuff that's going on there. I'll just talk about it very briefly. So Nick Spencer is announced that he's going to be finishing up his Spider-Man run, which has been happening forever since Marvel's Fresh Start began in 2018. It is, for me, a very flat run on Spidey. I'm very much looking forward to new creative units taking over. And apparently what Marvel is planning, which they announced today, is it's going to be, looks like a by-committee approach. Kelly Thompson's going to be involved, Saladin Ahmed, Zeb Wells of Hellions fame, of course, and of the original Spidey Brain Trust back in the 2007 Brand New Day era. And then, Patrick Gleason on art. So, all creators I like. I liked the Brand New Day Spidey Brain Trust era. Those are some really good Spidey comics. It was kind of fun at the time because I think it was coming out 3 times a month at that point, where you'd have a Fred Van Lent story and then a Mark Waid story, and it would bounce around like that in ways that were enjoyable. I did, and I kind of hope for I just kind of hope for that Hickman style vision. I think typically with a superhero run, I would like somebody to come in on Amazing Spider-Man and do the things for Spidey in their way that Hickman did for X-Men, because I actually do think Spider-Man's in kind of a rut and has been since post Superior Spider-Man. I would say that character, that universe could use some injection of fresh air. There does seem to be some indication that that's what this creative unit is going to be trying for. The teasers today, the teaser images, which I don't have up here with me, but I did tweet out, there's a very, very likely connection to Marvel's Beyond Corporation. The way that the logo, so it's called Spider-Man Beyond, is going to be this era. And then the way the text looks for Beyond, it looks like the same text as the Beyond Corporation, which is something that debuted in Next Wave and has most recently and perhaps most relevantly been referenced in, I think, the Al Ewing written Captain America and the Mighty Avengers run. So, and the Beyond Corporation is, honestly, it's hard to explain, but they're kind of alternate reality, basically dealing with, well, how would you put it? Just weird stuff that shouldn't exist. Essentially, it feels like a strange fit for Spider-Man, but I'm curious. It definitely has me interested in a way. It doesn't feel super predictable, and I would like to see, I would like to see that play out. I see also in the chat here, I see Bucks in 5. which I assume is a reference to the Milwaukee Bucks over the Atlanta Hawks. It pains me as a Chicagoan to see the easy road now, potentially, that the Bucks have to a title. I would not have begrudged the Bucks anything, or the city of Milwaukee for that matter, but for the very, very negative reaction I got as a Cubs fan when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016 from Brewers fans specifically. Brewers fans were not appreciative. They were not congratulatory. All the Brewers fans in my life, I feel like, were significantly too bitter about it. So I will begrudge a potentially easy Bucks road. But again, like, is it that easy? The Hawks are beating everybody. They look way better than anybody expected. The Bucks could barely beat the Nets with like 2 of their 3 superstars basically out. I mean, I know Harden came back, but that wasn't Harden really. The fact that they could barely get out of that alive, makes it seem like, okay, like I actually kind of here. My pick is actually the Suns to win it all. At this point, obviously they're up 2-0 on the Clips already. That's still going to be a series, but I'm going Suns over Bucks in 6. All right, for a little NBA talk for you. All right, so thanks everybody who's contributed here on the super chat. Thanks everybody who has put in questions. I greatly appreciate it. I will be back next week, almost certainly, pending new little Busings in my life. We'll see when paternity leave kicks in, but otherwise I'll